Hello and welcome to Techiechap. In today's episode we are going to be having a look at an Arch distribution called Garuda Linux. In particular, I am going to be taking a closer look at Garuda Dragonized edition. Let's find out how I got on after the intro. Here we are at the initial boot screen of Garuda, and as you can see it's a text-based installer initially, and we have the option to boot with either open source drivers or boot allowing proprietary drivers NVIDIA, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to boot with open source drivers simply because I'm installing this via a virtual box just to show you the installer, and then we will be switching to the actual machine where the Garuda Dragonized edition is installed. We may see a couple of error messages pop up on here because it's not recommended to run Garuda on a virtual machine, but I just wanted you to see the installer and how that works. So I'm going to select boot with open source drivers. Okay, and then this is going to run through the initial installation, which is basically starting the drivers of the live CD installer, and eventually what will happen is it will run through this and it will get to the actual live CD, which is a Garuda desktop, and you can then select install Garuda. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video because this takes a little while to start up, and then return again once we have the desktop installer up and running. And here we are. This is the Garuda welcome screen that greets you when you first boot from the live CD. I am expecting a couple of error messages to pop up here, given that this is a VM. And it does state on the Garuda website not to run this in a VM. So there we go. There's the one of the first messages, which is about access denied. But as you can see, you do actually get a full desktop environment with the live CD, and that kind of gives you a little preview of Garuda Linux on as it will appear on the desktop. And it is running the Dragonized edition, which it's certainly got a very different look and feel. But I'm going to click on go ahead and install Garuda Linux. Okay, and we just got to wait for the modules to start up, and they are now started. Because I'm based in England, I'm just going to select British English, and then my keyboard and everything else country will automatically be selected. So I click next to all of that. There's the keyboard layout, and in this case I'm just going to select erase disk. You can see the VirtualBox installer there, VBox hard drive, and you can see that you can choose to encrypt the system as well. I won't go for a swap file in this case. Let's just click on next and put in my name, Techiechap, and we'll just put in a very basic password because this really is just temporarily. And we'll click on next, and you get an overview of what will happen once you start the install procedure. And essentially it's telling you that it's using Butter file system, and it's going to take up all of the hard drive space. It does actually need a minimum of 30 gig for the installation, which is quite a lot actually for Linux. But if I just click on install, that's pretty much all there is to the install. Once you click on install, it will go off and it will start copying all the files to the hard drive, and eventually it will run through all of this, and then you click on finish and it will reboot. You remove your USB stick and you will then find yourself launching Garuda Linux. So I'll just leave that to install because it does take quite a while, and I'll just show you the finished screen once it's done, and yeah, and then we'll move over to the real hardware and we'll get a good look at what Garuda Linux looks and feels like on the desktop. Okay, so Garuda has been installed on this VirtualBox. You get a nice little message saying, all done, Garuda Linux Soaring has been installed on your computer. You may now restart into your new system or continue using the Garuda Linux Live environment. So if we tick on Restart Now, or you can carry on using the live environment if you need to just have a look around and see what it looks like. I'm going to restart now, and then what we're going to do is we're going to switch across to the actual hardware, which is going to be running on a laptop, and we're going to take a look at Garuda running on real hardware. So bear with me whilst I just switch cameras and we'll jump across. Right, so this is it. This is the first screen that greets you when you've installed Garuda Linux. This is the Dragonized edition, and as you can see, it does have quite a unique identity. I really like the fact that you get this Garuda welcome screen when you boot. It says Garuda Linux Talon, a rolling release, fast, friendly and performance focused OS. Garuda is loaded with amazing tools and supported by a great community. And you can certainly see that even looking at this initial welcome screen, they've really worked on a unified look and feel. So first, if we just take a look at Garuda Assistant, and let's see what's contained therein. I believe Garuda Assistant is a collection of tools for managing Arch, which is really useful because Garuda is based on Arch and Arch Linux, and Arch Linux does have a sometimes unfair criticism that things can be a little unstable, particularly when you are running applications that are the very latest applications, or you are very heavily into tweaking things on your Arch distribution. What can often happen is you tweak things to the extent that they break, and you find yourself either having to remove the application and reinstall it, which is a pain because you can lose all your customized preferences and so on, or the application just keeps crashing or hanging because there's a problem in the cache. Well, Garuda have thought of that and put a collection of tools in here to really help you manage that. And so you have things like Clear Package Cache or Clear Caches, which is really useful to have in an Arch distribution. You also have Remove Database Lock and Remove Orphans. So when a package gets orphaned and there's multiple copies of it running, then you can click here and it will remove those orphans, which is fantastic. Also, you have these reset config options as well, which is quite neat. So if, for example, you change a setting on the latte dock down here, then and it sort of messes it up, then you can click on this and click on reset selected configs, and it will then reset it back to the default, so you'll be back to where you were before you started. So that's really nice that that is in there, and that it's very easy to do, and it's right there on the first welcome screen. Very cool. So ButterFS is the default file system for this KDE edition Dragonized Garuda operating system, and it also has something called Snapper, which is down here, Snapper Tools. Now, Snapper Tools is about taking snapshots of your system. You can configure Snapper to take snapshots of your complete system and have a backup. And what's nice, of course, about that is if something does go wrong, then you can just revert back to another snapshot from the past. And depending on the frequency of your snapshots, that can be a real lifesaver if you are running this as your daily driver. So really the advice for Arch users generally is to run something like Snapper for snapshots, have that running anyway, just to have that in the background and creating those snapshots. That's quite nice, that's in there. System components, you can adjust what system components and what system services are actually started and up and running. So for example, you've got printing support, scanning support. If you want to print or scan, then you're going to need to tick those two and then click on apply, and that will then install printing and scanning support, which is pretty nice. It's there. Interesting that it's not enabled by default, but not everyone prints nowadays, so I guess understandable. You also get settings, general settings here, which are for perhaps the more advanced users, and you've got things like auto CPU frequency, power save tweaks as well. Can be handy if your CPU's always at 100% and the fans are getting really loud, then you can enable some of these things in here, and that will help. System specs is, as you would expect, a system specification report, but it does give us quite a lot of detail. So for example, we can see we are running KDE Plasma 5.24.5 and with Qt 5.15.4. We are indeed running a Latte dock, and that's obviously been quite customized for Garuda Linux, and I'm running this in terms of hardware on quite a low powered HP laptop. It's a HP laptop 15 running N5000 Pentium Silver CPU with 8 GB of RAM. So it's not the fastest of laptops by any means, but it seems to be running this quite comfortably. And just to check that out, sorry, that's the wrong one, that's Kde Partition Manager, which incidentally, I don't really know why it's in the Latte dock. It's not like you're going to be constantly adjusting your partitions all the time, but it's there anyway. Yeah, let's go to System Monitor. That was what I wanted to click. And we'll just see how the CPU is doing. And as you can see, the CPU, even though it is a Pentium Silver, so it really isn't the most powerful of CPUs I've done a review on, but it's doing okay. It's handling it. I'm obviously recording in OBS, I'm recording my webcam, and I'm recording the sound, and you know, it's not doing too bad. An average of 56.3%. So well done. it runs quite well. And of course, it being based on KDE is quite a light environment anyway, so you know, it's quite nice that it is able to run on here. So let's just close that. Okay, you also have Garuda Gamer, which are options if you want to install things like Steam, for example. So you've got these launchers here already, which is really nice actually, that it's all here. And yeah, and you've got emulators as well. So if you scroll through, you've got also some games and things like that. So actually really nice that those options are there. What I would say is that the Garuda team have really thought about what this operating system provides and how it provides it, and really thought about the layout and the look and feel. And there's really quite a lot here for a wide variety of users, it has to be said. Garuda Settings Manager, if we click on that, essentially is the settings manager, as you would expect. You can go into the hardware configuration, you can take a look at the kernel and see what kernel you are running. At the moment it's Linux Zen Kernel 5.18.3. So you can play about with this and install new kernels if you so wish. Garuda Network Assistant is quite cool. You also get quite a nice little Garuda Network Manager up here. Actually, it's the default KDE Network Manager, and as you can see, the Wi-Fi has been detected on this laptop as well, which again is quite nice. Yeah, you also get Garuda System Maintenance shortcut up here as well, and of course, because it's KDE, you have a clipboard manager, and KDE Connect is also installed by default. So all really, really nice. Garuda Services, if I just click on here, it's going to take me to the Garuda website, hopefully. And what's interesting about the default web browser that comes with Garuda is it's not Firefox, it's something called FireDragon. And FireDragon is a spin-off of Firefox. Actually, if we just scroll down here, it will give us a little bit more information on that. So it tells us a little bit about the Butter file system is a default file system. Let's just scroll down a little bit more about Garuda Assistant. While being a rolling release distro, our goal is to ensure that your system will not be left in an unbootable state after a problematic update. Thus, we use the Butter file system integrated with Snapper, which employs an automatic snapshot feature, backing up the system configuration before each update. Fantastic, that's already there. You can access recent snapshots directly from Grub. And that's awesome that that is already there. Also gives you some information on this thing called the chaotic AUR or Arch user repository. So it says here, Garuda uses chaotic AUR as repository featuring one of the bigger pre-compiled software choices out there out of the box. Among the selection of software are a lot of emulators, kernels, games, themes, and other commonly used tools, around 2,400 packages right now. Okay, here's the information on the web browser. It's described as a privacy-friendly yet usable browser based on LibreWolf FireDragon. We ship our own browser FireDragon, which is forked from LibreWolf. Amongst its features are privacy-friendly defaults, enhanced KDE integration, and a small collection of useful add-ons. The default search engine is SearX instance run on our server. So that's quite interesting. And you can see actually built in, you've got this thing called Dark Reader as a plugin is already enabled. You've got uBlock Origin as well enabled as well to help protect your privacy. So it's quite nice that that has been put together for you and is ready out of the box. Now, of course, you can always go off and install your own web browser if you want to or feel more comfortable with that as well. GUI for installing curated gaming software. We've just been through that, but again, the website's really cool at describing some of the features in here. So just to repeat again, it's a rolling release. Garuda Linux is a rolling release distro based on Arch Linux, which ensures always getting the latest software updates. We only use one extra repo on top of Arch Linux repos, placing us very close to Arch Linux without having to install the system via command line. It says here it will always be free. Garuda Linux will always remain free and open source. Our source code is currently hosted on GitHub. Everyone has right to copy, compile, study, modify, and redistribute the source code. We create it to have a Linux-based operating system that is easy to use and beautiful. And I wasn't sure really about the look and feel of this distribution when I looked at the screenshots, but actually now I'm using it, and particularly as I'm using it on a 1920 by 1080 screen, I find it's really nice. It's really nice to be using something that isn't your standard grey and blue desktop like so many other distributions out there. And it's nice to see a bit of colour as well in the desktop environment. So I'm quite enjoying using this distribution, it has to be said, and I'm enjoying the fact that there's these little touches, like up here you have your network usage, which you can look at and see what's exactly going on with your network. Volume control as well will take you straight to a very nice audio volume control panel, which you would expect with KDE because it does come with KDE desktop by default as well. It's not just limited to Garuda. One of the things that did throw me slightly was this Mac-esque way of working with the tied in application toolbar at the top here, a bit like Finder. So whatever application you launch, you'll actually find the menu items up here. It took a little bit of adjustment because I'm used to using things like Fedora as my daily driver, but once you get used to it, it's fine. If we click on download here, and you'll see there are a fantastic amount of options for Garuda Linux, and the minimum requirements, however, are quite high for Linux. So 30 gig storage space. I think that's because there's just so much bundled in here. 4 gig of RAM, a video card with OpenGL 3.3 or better, 64-bit system. It has a reasonable explanation of the installation procedure, recommendations, and then you get to the downloads part. Now I've downloaded Garuda KDE Dragonized, which is what you see here, but however you can download a GNOME edition, a Cinnamon edition, XFCE edition, a Mate or Mate edition, LXQT KWin edition, Wayfire edition, Sway edition, i3WM edition, and even Qtile edition. It's just mind-boggling the amount of editions actually they've put out there. So really, there's a Garuda for you, I think, is what they're trying to communicate there. On no matter what desktop environment you prefer. And actually, if you click on About and Who We Are, you really see that this is a worldwide effort with people from all over the world contributing and developing the various desktop editions. And you can see this particular edition, Dragonfire, is developed by someone called Nico from Germany. So yeah, fantastic to see such community collaboration as well on what really is quite a unique Linux distribution, I have to say. Whilst it uses and utilizes lots of pre-existing tools that are already out there, it pulls them all together to create this unified desktop experience, and I really like what they've done with that. So if I just close the welcome screen, and you can always go back to the welcome screen by clicking on the eagle head down in the bottom left. We also have here on the Latte dock, we have the standard KDE console, which is using Fish, and which is the friendly shell. And again, you can see a little bit more detail about the system there. You can see that the Windows Manager is KWin, that the Windows Manager theme is Sweet Dark as well. I also like the way the desktop fades and blurs into the background like this, and that's for me quite a nice touch. I like that they've thought about that. And then you have the Fire Dragon web browser. You've got the Dolphin file manager, as you would expect with KDE, and you can see all of those sweet icon themes as well. We've had a look at the system monitor. It's quite nice, it's there. For some reason the KDE Partition Manager's here. Don't quite agree with that. I don't know why it's there. System settings, of course. If we just go into that, that will take you to the standard KDE system settings that if you've ever used KDE before, they're pretty much the ones that you would expect. If we just click on icons, we can see a little bit more detail about the type of icons that are being used, and you can see they are this beauty line icon set, but you can also change that to any of the suite icons that are available, and yeah, there's quite a selection there, as well as the default KDE Breeze and Breeze Dark icons, or the Adwater icons as well. Window decorations on here are a customized suite dark, as we saw earlier. Yeah, appearance. You can also, of course, set up links to online accounts. So if we just click on here and click down here for add new account, these are the things that you can link into, including Google, Nextcloud, OwnCloud as well, which is again quite nice. You can provide user feedback. You've got firewall settings as well, which is always good. It's a really nice distribution. Clicking up here will launch your application launcher, and you can basically type, for example, if I open, you get the OBS Studio, which is really one of the only applications that I installed on here after getting it up and running. But you can see it's quite rapid when you are searching around. And if we just look at all the applications that are already installed, so we have KDE Connect already installed as well, which is quite cool. Multimedia, I've installed Kden Live as well for putting this video together on here. Office, disappointingly, we don't have LibreOffice by default, but that can be easily obtained. Settings, you can get into the Garuda Settings Manager. Incidentally, this desktop environment also ties into Kvantum Manager as well, so it uses a Kvantum theme. So it's worth knowing that if you were to play around with the desktop look and feel. System, utilities, etc. Yeah, there's quite a lot already in there. If we just have a look at the software manager, which is this thing called Octopi, which if you're an Arch user, you'll know all about. It's essentially Synaptic for Arch users. And if we click up here and go to repository, these are the repositories that are currently enabled on Octopi. We have Core, Extra, Community, Multilib, Chaotic AUR, and the standard AUR as well, the standard Arch user repository, and that will give you access to 15,675 packages. So a huge amount to have a look at and play around with there. And installing applications in Octopi, if you've ever used any other package manager, essentially you look for whatever it is you want. So for example, if I type KDE and let's just select something random, you click on install and it's going to say, oh, there's some dependencies here, which is quite nice. So you can tick those as well, and it will install those dependencies. Even though you've clicked install, it hasn't actually applied it. So what you can do is you can carry on looking for things you want to install, build up a whole list of applications or packages that you want to install all at once, and then all you have to do is click the green tick there to apply, and it will go off and install all those applications as a batch of application or packages all at once, which actually I've always liked. I do like software managers that have a GUI as well, and I do think it's one of the things Linux is missing, is having a really nice software manager installer. But when you are installing lots of applications, and certainly when you have first set up and you just want to get things working, Octopi really is the way to go for that. So let me just close that. I don't really want to install those things. I was just showing you what it looked like. If we go to the snapper tools as well, whilst it's down here, and if I just put in my authentication password, and that should launch the snapper tool. Here we go. And as you can see, it's already taken some snapshots. If we click on settings, we have enable timeline. Snapshots 5 hours every day, so every 5 hours it will take a snapshot. Again, that's really cool. And if you want to roll back, you just click on the snapshot you want to roll back to and click on restore. That is so good. Obviously Apple have or they used to have, I'm not sure if they still have it, that kind of timeline facility where you could go back to a different date in time. But yeah, Snapper does a really good job of doing something similar where you can go back to before you made certain changes and restore your system back to that point. That's really cool. And actually with most Arch users, they will have something like Snapper enabled for snapshots, because when you're running a system based on Arch and you are downloading the latest releases of everything and running them, you can run into problems occasionally. So it's always good to have that snapshot as a backup to roll back to when you need to. So what do I think of Garuda Linux overall? Well, I'm quite impressed. I have to say, I'm impressed that the developer has put so much thought into this this desktop environment. You can really get a sense of that they've really thought about how it hangs together. Once you get used to the tied-in application launcher file menu up here, so that rather than actually on the window itself, once you get used to that, it works fine. It's got that kind of Mac feel to it, and I think that's further strengthened by the fact that they out of the box have a latte dock enabled as well, that sort of behaves in a Mac-esque way. I'm quite impressed with this. I am. It's pretty decent. It's, as I've said, nice to look at a desktop, a Linux desktop that isn't sticking to the grey and blue and sort of business-esque colour scheme that so many desktop environments seem to have nowadays. It's also nice that whilst this is a dark mode, if you like, enabled out of the box, it's nice that it's been done in what I feel is such a tasteful manner. I wasn't sure if I would like the Garuda look and feel by looking at the screenshots that I had seen of it, but actually now I'm using it, I really like it. I really like the fact that there's so much colour here, and I like the fact that the wallpaper blurs into the background like this, and that there are plenty of transparencies. It makes me feel like I'm using a modern desktop, and that seems to be what they're going for here. So overall, what would I give this as a rating? I think I will give this 4 out of 5. For me, it's a really impressive Linux offering, and I'm going to run it for a little while and see how stable it is, but so far so good. It's, I have to say, really nice to use something different as well. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this review of Garuda Linux Dragonized Edition, and if you have, then please click on like, and if you really like it, then click on subscribe. And yeah, Garuda Linux, pretty decent. Alright, that's all from me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.